Okay. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Follow the Light Music Review. My name is John DeLaurentis, and today, for episode 3 of the series Interviews, I have the pleasure to have Tom McKeown on the show, who is a part of the progressive rock band Damascus, who released 4 independent cassette tapes in the 1980s and early 1990s. Tom has also been a part of the Americana folk duo Humphrey McCowan, which morphed into the band Shadowfields, and this year released the critically acclaimed debut album from his progressive rock side project, Undoubting Thomas. So, welcome, Tom, to the show.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah. So I wanted to start off with what are your earliest recollections of getting into music when you were growing up?
I would say I grew up in Aurora, the mythical birthplace of Wayne's World and Aurora, Illinois. And in the basement of my parents' house, we had a record player. And I remember my first couple records um, were I got a Carpenter's record. I think it was the
I like
best of
Carpenter.
Carpenters or something like that. Um, Karen Carpenter was an amazing singer.
Yeah.
Um, but I believe my second album that I got was Inagata Vida
Mm,
by Iron Butterfly.
yeah.
And that kind of set me down a path. And I had buddies around the neighborhood that, listened to The Who or the Stones. And so I was naturally just drawn to music right away. Um, I think I like noises. I just like the sound of things. Um, and so that got me wanting to play drums. After listening to Inagata Vita with the 20-minute drum solo, I figured,
Yeah.
I want to do that. So my parents bought me a cheap drum kit, and I think I trashed it within a week. It was destroyed, and then had some bongos and other things. And the school down the block from where I lived, for some odd reason, one summer, I think I was like in second, third grade, maybe fourth grade. They threw out all the band instruments. They had
Oh,
a big dumpster, and they just chucked them out a window. And so my friends and we went dumpster diving. I got a sousaphone. I never learned to play that, but it did make some noises. We got some snare drums and some trombones, and um, I've just had a fascination with sound. And when we moved out of Aurora, that's when I asked for my first guitar. And like most people in the late '60s, early '70s, guitars were not really all that good. And so I think it was like a Checkmate. I think it might have been the brand. Probably from Kmart or something like that. It was a classical guitar, thoroughly unplayable. But instantly I started writing songs on it, and just got a little bit of lessons, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And after that, sports was kind of over.
yeah. 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 And just to follow up on that, like, how did you get started on learning? So you started out with the guitar. How did you move on to the other instruments, and how did you learn? Were you just self-taught, or did you take lessons?
I took lessons on guitar for about a year. I took lessons from a friend's older sister, and that friend was Mark from the band Damascus. His older sister played guitar, and I asked her to teach me. So I learned like One Tin Soldier and Blowing in the Wind. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, lots of folk music,
Yeah.
and it gave me the first position chord structures, and I was able to learn from that. Um, then I really wanted to know more, and I remember stopping those lessons, and there was a time for 6 months I took jazz lessons. Um, there was a really great jazz guitarist in our area, and I only took 6 months of lessons because by the time 6 months hit, he had given me so much information I couldn't even assimilate everything that he gave me. So I just had to, like close down the lessons and just start learning. The funny thing is, at the time, all I really wanted to learn how to play was "Dream On" by Aerosmith. I just want to learn that Joe Perry,
Yep.
you know, that harmonic minor
Yep.
guitar solo. I just wanted to learn how to play that, but he showed me all kinds of different chord structures, so um, that helped. After that, I didn't take any more guitar lessons. I just sat around with records all day, and put the needle down, play it, try to see if I could figure out exactly what are they doing, and then uh, that's basically how I kept learning on guitar. Keyboards was a different thing, and I did not start playing keyboards until Damascus began. Um, I was in a band called Hayes um, through my high school years, and even up to, I guess I was about 20 when Hayes kind of ended. Um, but by the end of that, I was starting to get into more progressive music. I was listening to more Kansas and Yes and ELP, things like that. And I started auditioning keyboard players, and I realized pretty early on that in those bands, the keyboard player was the guy, like
Yeah.
to me, like without Tony Banks, what is Genesis? They're
Mm.
still great. They were all phenomenal musicians, but Tony Banks, what he did really set the stage. Um, and So my ego was such at that time that I couldn't bear the thought of somebody else kind of dictating the way songs were going to go in my band. So, unfortunately, God worked it out in the long run, but it was basically ego driven that I had picked up keyboards. And I really loved the organ work of Steve Walsh in Kansas. And
Yeah.
so the first keyboard I bought was an organ. And all the early Damascus albums, or yeah, the releases that we did on cassettes, they were all you could almost see my progression. You could hear it because I was while I was learning, I was writing songs. So
Right.
I'd write a song that would challenge my ability, so I'd get a little bit better, and then the next song I make it even harder, and that's kind of the way that went.
Well,
By the time we were on the fourth album, I got fairly proficient.
sounds good now with all the stuff you did on the keyboards. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I think I had picked up the guitar, um and believe it or not, I didn't learn like the guitar traditionally. I learned it from a nun at a because I went to a Catholic school down where I used to live because there was no public school in the town, so my parents sent me to a Catholic school. And it
Mm-hmm.
was a nun, and all she taught us was, like you said, she taught the folk stuff, the Blowing in the Wind and stuff by America, Crosby, Stills and Nash, all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting how that's how it started. Like, and you start learning. It's almost when I took lessons later on, then the guy who taught me like the the theory and the scales and all that stuff. But it was nice to learn songs and be able to play songs like right away. So kind of gets you more stoked for it, I guess,
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
guitar. So. Um, so kind of coming off of all that, who would you say, well, you kind of mentioned some of your musical influences. Is there other ones, or was there one particular musical influence that you would say was probably the strongest or the greatest in your life, as far as influence overall?
I'd say early on for guitar players, it was Joe Perry from Aerosmith. There was just something about his playing that really drew me in. And then Jeff Beck, which was
Yeah.
um, to this day, I listen to Blow by Blow and Wired, and I think, how does a guy come up with those lines? Because he
Yeah.
doesn't go where you would ever go. His melodic ideas and his solos, his phrasing is all completely unique. And you wouldn't call him a shredder, but he can play fast enough. But he plays something that's instantly recognizable as him,
Yeah.
and but it's interesting. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those
Beck.
two.
He's really, yeah, I was just gonna say Beck on that album you mentioned, Blow by Blow, because we've ended as lovers has been one of my
Oh,
time. The guitar solo on that gives me chills, even though I've heard it hundreds of times. And it's a Stevie Wonder song, of course, but the way he plays the lead on that, it's like to me, it's probably one of my all-time favorite lead guitar solos ever on that song.
I would say definitely. Yeah, he's amazing. Um, I'd say in the last 15, 20 years, Ronnie Stolt from the Flower Kings has been a
Yep.
huge, um, I don't know if I call him an influence because I never learned any Flower King songs. I basically learned everything that Joe Perry ever wrote. And
Yeah.
as much as I could figure out of Jeff Beck, I learned, um, but I never learned any Flower Kings. But there was always something about Ronnie's playing that drew me in because he's very melodic, kind of like
Yeah.
a Brian May kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, I can hear him on other people's records and instantly I know it's him. Um, like, again, I'm not really into shredders. Um,
Right.
I'm into melody and interesting ideas, and I'm into sound. And so all three of those guitar players, they had a sound, and that's what really drew me in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Because if you can, like, I don't like, I don't mind the shredding as long as the shredding has some kind of melodic purpose. If it's just shredding for shredding's sake, to me, it's not interesting to me. It's got to have the melody is key. That's why, what like probably one of my favorite guitar players or my favorite guitarist would be Phil Keaggy, in the Christian realm because
Hmm.
he has a sense of melody and he can do any style of music. And that's always like, if you're gonna play fast, there should be melody woven into it, not just shred for shred's sake. Doesn't, like you
I
said,
agree.
you know.
I agree. I was blown away by Yngwie Malmsteen when
Yeah.
he came on the scene when he was in Alcatraz.
Right.
The first Alcatraz album that he was on, I remember when that came out, and I was floored. I was like, "Ooh, I should just give up guitar now," uh, because he was an incredible shredder.
Yeah.
But after a while, unless you're a guitar player, I think that shredding becomes boring to the average listener.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I find that if you go to a lot of those concerts, you know, 80 to 90% of the people in the audience are guys that are guitar players. And
Yeah.
I was just never really into that. Trying to impress somebody with speed or whatever. I could play fast enough to get the ideas across that I want, and that's all I wanted to be able to do was to be able to get the melody ideas out and have the speed that could create the intensity that you want for a specific song.
Right. Right. Exactly. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit. Why don't you talk about how your journey of faith toward Christ began?
Oh, you want to know a little about that? When I was in Hayes, it was a band. Uh, we played a lot of clubs, when I was like 14, 15 years old. We were playing places like Beginnings, which was a big Danny Serafini from Chicago, the drummer from
Yep.
Chicago. He owned a nightclub called Beginnings, and our bass player, um, he was family friends with um, uh, Dino, who was um, the manager of Beginnings. And so we got to play Beginnings fairly often. We got to open for, I believe we opened for Trillion. I don't know if you're familiar with Trillion. They were a kind of progressive band back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Pat Leonard, who is the keyboard player in that, left, and he was the producer for Madonna for many, many years.
Interesting.
So, and Pat Leonard also wrote and produced a record with Kevin Gilbert called Toy Matinee. Unbelievable album. That that's one of my all-time favorites. But anyway, uh, I remember there was a night that uh, a friend, Mark from my previous band. He'd just come back from Hayes. He'd left Hayes to go to school. He came back a summer after school, and he wanted to take me to a concert to see a band called Res Band, and I'm playing, Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and a lot of heavier stuff. And I'm like, I don't really want to see this. This is a Christian band kind of thing. And I honestly went to the concert to be able to mock it, and to say I've seen it. It's stupid, and I could just write that off. But at that night, um, changed my life. And that was in December 12th, 1980, I think, or 81. And that was actually the night that I gave my life to Christ, because Glenn Kaiser, the singer and guitar player, and I think he was the main songwriter for the band,
Yeah.
he just kind of like rattled off, like, is this your life? And at that point in my life, things were not going well. I expected, by that time I was 21. I expected that I would already be signed to a label. My band Hayes had been offered a record deal, and due to how bad the deal was, my parents told me, they flat out said, you cannot take this record deal.
Yeah.
And so I rejected the record deal, and things kind of kept sliding down, and I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go, and there was no hope. And so I figured I'd run my life into the ground, and you know, I just, at that point, I just offered it up to Christ and said, you just take over at this point. Whatever you want from my life now, I'll do my best to follow your lead on everything. And so I gave my life over to him that night, and things changed pretty drastically. It was kind of astounding, because years before, I'd been in small group Bible studies, and it was basically, I went there to hang out with my girlfriend. um, and I'd fall asleep midway, and I went from there to having this insatiable desire to know everything that the Bible said. And I needed to know. I just needed to know. I don't know where well, obviously now I know that it was the Holy Spirit, but I didn't understand where that fire was coming from. But instantly my life started turning around. I dove deep into the Bible. Um, very quickly, I wanted my music to reflect that, instead of playing covers. And we had an album or so worth of originals in Hayes, but my direction was changing. And I remember going back to the band and sitting them all down in a room and saying, um, this happened to me, and I'm going to be changing directions with my lyrics. You guys want to come along on this ride with me? And everybody but one quit. They they'd all packed up all their gear and left the rehearsal space, and that was the last I ever saw them.
Mm.
But Cliff, the bass player, he stuck with me, and he was the bass player through all of Damascus as well. And so that's, in a nutshell, kind of how I came to Christ. It was through a Christian concert that I went to mock, but my life got changed instead.
Yeah. And a Resurrection Band is a band they were hard rock, bordering on metal, but they always had a lot of melody too. So
Yeah,
um, I appreciate. I mean, I saw them in concert one time, and they were loud. It was very loud,
they were really
very
loud.
loud. But their music, very melodic and very deep, and they always had a lot of meat in their lyrics. Um, so I appreciated them too. Um, so let's talk about, because you mentioned Damascus. Talk about the formation of Damascus and how you brought everyone together for that band.
Damascus began with just basically Cliff and I. Um, before that meeting with the band where everybody quit, I had actually gone over to Cliff's house, um, since Cliff had been a friend of mine for years, through my high school years. And I just went over to his house. I was 21. Cliff's a couple years older than me. And I explained to him what happened and what I wanted to do with my life and with music at this point. And I asked him, "Are you interested in any of that?" He said, "Funny that you bring that up, because I was just going to talk to you this next week that I was going to quit the band because I wanted to change directions."
Hmm.
And I was like, "How interesting." He'd been on some service trips with the church. Um, it was an Appalachia service project where, he would say that he went down to help the poor people, but the poor people brought him to Christ, and his life changed then, just as mine had. So God has interesting plans for us, and I still to this day I don't know why he picked two boneheads like me and Cliff, but he did. He does. He picks the most um, people that you would kind of write off as like that's never going to happen for that person. But God in His grace picked us and chose us and pulled us out of where we were. And so Cliff and I were together. Mark had gotten back from school, and I talked to Mark. Mark was in Hayes in the early years of Hayes, and he left to go away to school. And Mark played guitar and sang as well as I did. And so I asked him if he'd like to join, and he joined right away. And then we were stuck with a drummer. We had no idea what to do about a drummer. I knew a lot of good drummers, but none that had any kind of spiritual slant at all to their life. Um, so we just went to the local music store and you know put up cards on the bulletin board that said wanted drummer, for uh, Christian band or something like that. And Dave Coy then gave us a call from that, and that's how we got together. So it was three old friends that I known Cliff and Mark for by that time probably 6 7 years we'd been together on and off, especially as friends. Um, and then we brought in Dave, and he became a brother to us, and that's kind of how that began. And immediately I bought the organ. I bought the organ as soon as the band started because I just felt like I want something richer harmonically. Chord structures on a guitar are somewhat limited, especially if you're going to be using distorted guitars. There's only
Yeah,
so much you can do and make it understandable.
right.
But when you're playing a keyboard, since the tone of a keyboard is much clearer, you can add sevenths, ninths, seconds, sixths into these chords, and they'll still sound clear, and you'll understand what's going on. But for the way I was starting to write, I needed something more. So that began Damascus.
Okay, cool. So speaking about writing songs, so what is your process in composing music and lyrics? Like, how do you go about it? Do you write your music first, the lyrics first, or a combination? Like, what's your process behind when you approach composition for
It's
songs?
it's kind of gone back and forth, and I think that every song I've written has been a little bit different. Um, Sometimes a lyrical idea will just be there, and that'll be it. I'll have the whole thing, and then I just have to write music for it. And I find it to be by far the easiest because the lyrics are going to dictate the meter,
Right.
and so it makes writing the music way simpler for me. Sometimes you just have a good riff though, and you go, "Oh, I like that." And sometimes a combination. I've got this riff, but I can't really put any lyrics over that riff. But that might be the start of a song, and then when we break into a verse, and it can simplify. Um,
Right.
I wrote a lot of stuff on an acoustic guitar. I rarely ever wrote anything on an electric guitar. I had this really cheap Epiphone guitar that my parents bought me when I think I was 11, and that for all the time through Damascus. That was my only acoustic guitar, and I wrote everything that was on guitar. I wrote on that acoustic. Kind of funny, but that's the way it was. And um, so like I said, it goes back and forth. I don't really have a set way that I write it. If I'm sitting around noodling and something comes to mind, I'll start recording it on my phone. Not back then, I didn't have a phone, but
Right.
I've had cassette machines, and I would record onto a cassette so I could remember what it was, or I'd just write down lyrics. I always kept a notebook full of lyrics, and I filled up many notebooks full of lyrics.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, so after Damascus, so you went with Damascus after they disbanded. Talk about how the partnership with Heather Humphrey began and why you chose to go in the Americana folk musical direction, and what was your vision for that musical direction that you went into?
Uh, Damascus was definitely a prog era
Right.
of my life, and I was always going for interesting sounds. I I love synthesizers, so there was that point where I had 13 of them that we took out on tour, and it was walls of synths on both sides, and a rack full of synths in the back. Um, but I really loved those kind of bizarre, otherworldly kind of sounds. And people would, I've had people come up after shows and say, "We like coming to your shows because we like hearing all the weird sounds you'll come up with, or, interesting things like that."
Yeah.
Um, but when Damascus broke up, we basically died out when Dave pulled the plug. Mark had left a couple years before to move for a job. And then Dave, just seeing that the industry wasn't ready for us. We were in the dead zone of prog music. I think around 94, prog started picking back up again, like
Yeah.
Porcupine Tree and Spock's Beard and Flower Kings. They all came into existence between 94 and 96. Even like Dream Theater,
Yeah.
for progressive metal. But we were in that dead zone and we couldn't get traction. And I think it was just a sad time. And he said that that was it. And so when he quit, Cliff and I just folded it up. I left all the PA and lights and everything to Cliff to get rid of. And I honestly, I gave up on music for a good 5 years. It wasn't until mid or late 97 before I ever started playing again. I'd sold off most of my keyboards, and um, by that time, I'd had my son. He was born, and I also decided I didn't want to tour. Um, and so, out of depression and discouragement, I gave up, just hung it up. And late 97, I was asked if I would lead worship at a local church, which was not something that I ever anticipated or wanted to do because it wasn't my style at all. I'm a progressive rock keyboard player.
Yeah.
I'm noodly bits kind of guy, right? I didn't play, like piano kind of things. Um, but I did, and I grew in that, and I did that for I guess till about 2005, I think it was, that I 2005, 2006, maybe might have been 2006. I left that church, and I worked part time as a music director. That was a big growing phase of my life. I'm not working with professional musicians anymore. Now I'm working with lay people that
Right.
have, you know, various levels of skill, and learning how to put my ego aside and not to beat them up. that that was that was definitely a learning thing, and I didn't do
Yeah.
well at it at the beginning, because I wanted it to be phenomenal. I didn't want worship to be just like, oh, that was okay. I wanted it to be really something special. it took me many years to get better at that. So I left that church. I went to another church, burnt out on that because now I'm burnt out on the prog music that I was doing. Now I'm burnt out on the church music that I'd done for a while. Um, I wrote an album with the first church that I was at. I wrote a lot of original pieces, and we put out an album from that church. But a year after that, then I left the church, and or a few years after that, I was at this other church now, just attending. Um, then I decided that maybe I'll join the worship team and just play guitar on and off because somebody knew who I was. And they said, "Hey, would you like to sit in?" And so I said, "Okay." Um, I sat in on guitar a little bit. It wasn't really to my liking, and so I went to her and I told her I was not going to be on the team anymore. It really wasn't where I felt I was at that point. And she said, "Well, the funny thing is, I think that you were my replacement because I'm leaving." And I was kind of shocked by that, but it ended up being true. I um, became her replacement. I became the director at this church. I stayed there for 11 years. And right away, I started assembling a team, trying to build a team as I did in the previous church. Um, but there's this one person that um, was super encouraging all the time, and that was Heather. And I had mentioned a few months into my tenure there, I mentioned to the team and anybody that was hanging around, I said, "Is anybody interested in writing some songs? Because I want to write some more songs." And nobody said anything that Sunday. A week later, Heather came back and said, "I talked to my husband, and he says yes, that I can do this, and so it's my time, and I want to do this. When do we start?" And so I
Mhm.
think it was like 28th of August in 2006 that we wrote our first song together. It was basically because it was out of friendship, and she had a desire to do something, and I'd rather work with somebody that has a talent but is really passionate about doing something than somebody who's like, I could take it or leave it. I When people are kind of wishy-washy on what they want to do,
Yeah.
that kind of drives me a little bit crazy, and I don't it doesn't make me want to work with them. But Heather was never that way. She was always very passionate about, everything that she was involved in. So we started writing, and we wrote for publishers. I started off as her producer friend, which we laugh about now, because basically she was writing songs and she'd write melodies and words, and then I just have her sing into a microphone, and then from there I would take it and I'd orchestrate the whole thing, and then she'd come back and re-sing it again, and then we'd build songs like that. And it wasn't till a year or so later that we started writing songs together. That's something that's kind of special. You know, People think of Lennon and McCartney as the greatest songwriting team,
Yeah.
but they never wrote together. Same with Bernie Taupin and Elton John. They didn't write together. They
Right.
wrote separately. But in the case of Humphrey McKeown with Heather, we started writing together, which was unheard of. I never did that with Damascus. Uh, with Damascus, I wrote all the music, and I wrote half the lyrics. The other half of the lyrics, Dave Coy, the drummer, wrote. But we never wrote in the same room. And basically,
Right.
I'd come back to the band with a finished song on a cassette, and I'd say, "Here's the song." Everybody learned their parts, and then we'd go on from there. But Heather and I just started writing together from day one. And well, after that first year, we started writing together, and it kind of just blossomed from that. And we wanted to write for publishers, so we started, trying to sell songs to publishers in New York and LA and Nashville and Chicago. and we got kind of nowhere with that. And we did that for years. We dozens and dozens and dozens of songs. So finally, by 2012, we decided to take just a handful of the songs and put them out as our first album, which was When the World Was Young.
Yeah.
And honestly, what drove us to drove me back into an Americana kind of thing. Uh, I felt that um, progressive music was kind of dead, and I wasn't going to get anywhere. And I just wanted somebody to hear what I wrote, and I just wanted it to be heard. And Heather's a great lyricist, and she writes great melodies. And I thought, well, this could work together. And
Yeah.
I was um, by the second album, I was very strict into this thing, which I am not using any more keyboards anymore at all. You know, which that was the thing I was noted for, was for keyboard playing. But I was like, I'll play piano, but that's the only thing that'll be on any of our records anymore. And so we just kind of stripped it all down to acoustic instruments.
Yeah.
By the second album, I had bought a mandolin, and you know, I've had a progression of mandolins, uh, and we just kept with that thing that we did. There's elements of progressive music in chord sequencing and some of that in arrangements, um, but it's more rootsy and easier to digest, I guess, for the average listener, and
Yeah.
that's why we went in that direction.
Now you mentioned in the course of your talking about that you had recorded an album with a praise. Is that the Lost Tom McKeown album? Did it ever get any distribution, or
You
was
know,
it just a local thing?
no, it was on CD, and
Oh, it was. Okay.
it did sell 1,000 copies. Um, um, it was Grace Community Church shouted out. It had a picture of my son on the cover. It was kind of funny, um, but it was an interesting thing. You know, it was taking songs that I wrote and just kind of having a choir work with me on that, and so it was a start. But yeah, I guess that it would be kind of a lost thing. I don't know that anybody else outside of the church ever heard that, because I think all 1,000 copies were bought by people in the church.
One of those rarities on
Yeah,
Discogs,
yeah.
if it
I
is
really hadn't
there.
I really hadn't thought about it for years, but that is funny. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you mentioned like all of this work for the publishers, writing songs for publishers. There was no bites at all. There was like nobody who picked up a song and recorded it, or what? Or were there some?
there we got really close. The closest we got was a song called "I Don't Care." It's
Okay.
kind of a countryish song.
Yeah, that's on
Um,
one of the Shadow. I think
yeah,
it's on the first
exactly.
one.
It's on the very first Humphrey
Yeah,
McCowan album,
yeah.
and I called it "I Don't Care." The publisher came back, he was like, "You got the wrong name of it. It should be All I Want Is You." And it it got into this it got into this weird thing with the publisher, and I don't know. It got close, but it didn't get picked up. And for years, we just had this idea that, all right, some Americana or country artist is going to pick up some of this stuff. There was a song on the first album called "The Box," and I thought Trace Atkins needs to sing this song, and we tried to get into his hands. Uh, we tried really hard, and but you know, it was again one of those things where you just pound your head against the door, and you're hoping that the door opens up, and it doesn't open up, and you decide, what am I going to do? And that's when we decided to put together a band and actually go out and do something. That that first album, basically the first and second album, I played everything on them. Um, Actually, first, second, and third album. The first three albums were just me on all instruments, and me and Heather singing. we'd have guest musicians come in and play uh, trombone or saxophone or trumpet or
Right.
something like that. Um, but it was just basically us, and then we decided to try to get the stuff heard, which was a very funny time because when we decided to see what people thought, we decided we were going to do open mics, and I think this was like 2010, 2011, and Heather had never done an open mic before. I didn't do open mics because I don't want to do open mics. I write songs, and
Yeah.
I wrote for big rock bands kind of thing, and I wasn't interested in that. But we decided, all right, we're just going to see if any of these songs go over. And I remember first half dozen open mics that we did, we would argue so badly. Like my wife Donna and Heather's husband Dennis. I don't know why they ever stuck around with us because it was painful. Because we'd be arguing with each other because, she'd be anxious and, I don't know if I even want to do this kind of thing. And, um, it's just a weird thing, moving from being a studio thing to being a
Right.
live thing. It's a totally different thing. And we had we butted heads on a lot of things like that. But eventually it all started coming together and we found our footing as a team and then started bringing other people around us to help us fill it out.
Yeah, so that was gonna my follow-up with that was gonna be how did you make that decision to just go from the duo into the Shadowfields? Was it also because you wanted to do some, live concerts as well, bring it to the
Yeah,
stage?
that was basically it. We wanted to, I guess this was, I think 2011, 2012, um, right around the time the first album came out, is when we decided that we're going to put together a band because now we've done some of these open mics and the songs really went over really well. And we're like, okay, this could be a thing. And so we found a drummer. Heather knew a drummer, and we went out and saw him play, and he came into the band that was Jim Levis, and um, then we had a whole host of other players with us at that time. Cliff from Damascus stayed with and came over into Shadowfields. I hadn't played with him in what 20 years or whatever,
Yeah.
and he came back and he played with us for a bit, and um, and we had another guitar player and no actually two other guitar players and a keyboard player and a conga player. I think at one point we had 8 people in the band and we played a show. And I remember I remember that show. We got done with the show, and Heather and I looked at each other and said, "Well, that's it for that," because we couldn't hear a thing we sang, and to us, it was all about the harmonies. You know,
Right.
we were kind of like the Everly Brothers in a way, where it was all about the harmonies. We are huge fans of a band named the Civil Wars. I don't know if you're familiar with the Civil Wars.
I don't know, I
Um,
don't think so.
John Paul White and Joy Williams. Joy Williams, like in her really young teenage years, was a Christian pop star.
Mm,
Um, Super fluffy stuff, not to my liking at all. But when she got together with John Paul White, they wrote some really swampy Americana stuff that I really liked a lot. And Heather and I were influenced by them. And we decided that, we got to get rid of the band. The band is too big, it's too noisy. Um, and that was after the third album. And we dumped everybody and then put it back together again after we wrote the fourth album. And we wrote the fourth album just alone again and brought in a violin player this time. And actually, we found another bass player, Tony Metters, that came in and played on one song on the fourth album. And that was basically his audition. We brought him in to see how it was going to work out. I remember Jim, the drummer, his wife's telling us that Tony is too nice of a person to be with you two. So the take that for what it is, I guess. And it's true. Tony is a super nice guy. And so Tony was in the band. So now it was the four of us, and we had a violin player with us. It didn't really work out. We found another violin player. Uh, didn't work out all that great. He left the band, but then that violin player then called me. This was probably 6 months after the fourth album came out. Um, and he said, "Hey, you still looking for a violin player?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I know just the guy." And he gave Heather Gary's phone number, Gary Jacklin, who's our violin player in Shadowfields. Um, gave his number to Heather. Heather called him up while he was on vacation with his wife, and we just hit it off. And so 20, I think it was 20, 20 late 2015 or early 2016 was when Gary joined the band, and the band's been basically the same ever since. And we've done a lot of traveling together, and a lot of windshield time, I guess. And we love each other, and so that's why it works. And because
Yeah.
some bands would be at each other's throats, but we all get along so great. We're all at similar stages in life, and even though our musical interests are polar opposites, it's fun to be on the road. And we typically will set up a tablet, and somebody will call out a song. We go around in a circle, and we just play. Like Tony will have a funk thing come on. So we'll listen to some Tower of Power or something like that.
Yeah.
I'll throw on some old Kansas thing or something like that, or maybe Get It On by Chase. You know that song? Man, that was a great song.
It sounds
Anyway,
familiar.
uh, Bill Chase, one of the greatest trumpet players, just incredible horn section in that band. But anyway, so that's how Shadowfields has been. And starting with the fifth album, the band has been actually recording all the albums with us. I haven't played every instrument anymore because I don't play
Yeah.
violin very well at all.
And you guys are still touring, right? You still do concerts from here from time to time to Shadowfields?
Yeah, we had a show last weekend, and it was great. We haven't been able to tour because of some health reasons with one of the guys, and this last year. But before that, we're usually out anywhere to 4 to 6 tours a year, and a tour is typically 5 days, 5 to 10 days, depending on how far we go.
Yeah.
And we'll be everywhere. Since we're in Chicago, we've been everywhere from Minnesota to North Carolina, um, New York, uh, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma. So basically everywhere you can kind of go.
Yeah.
We haven't made it out farther than Oklahoma. That was about as far out as we've gotten west. So I think we'd have to fly. Um, but yeah, we like to travel because being an original band, it feels like we have to travel.
Right.
Um, because there's only so many times you can play in your own area if you're an original band. We
Right.
we sometimes get a little upset that there are there are cover bands that make a decent living playing somebody else's music, and they're
Right.
booked every weekend. I always found that funny. It's like, wait a minute, you didn't write this stuff, yet you're getting paid to play this stuff. It just
Yeah.
it didn't make any
How it
sense
works.
to me. But
Yeah.
also, the rest of the guys in Shadowfields, they all play in in cover bands.
Okay.
Shadowfields is the only original band that they play in, um, because they're players. They need to play, and they want to play all the time. For Heather and I wouldn't say we're players, because if it wasn't for the writing and it being our own songs, I probably wouldn't bother playing, because that's not what I'm into.
Right.
I know that sounds odd to
Yeah.
some people, but the
No, it makes
playing
sense.
part is the least important part of it to me. The big payoff is hearing the final master on a
Right.
song. So whatever the song is, when it's finished, I remember when our last album, Wonderful World, came out, and I heard the master of the first song on it. I'm like, finally, finally. We worked so many years to get to a point where, sonically, the records would sound like what we heard in our heads. And, you work through your abilities. And um, I've progressed and got better over the years in the last, whatever, 50 years that I've been doing this. Um, but that's the big thing for me, is to hear it when it's completed, and we can sit in the studio and hear it and go, that's it. We've we've arrived on that. And then we get the chance to play it. That's even better. Or, that's a good part of it. But the most important part was writing it and recording it for us.
Yeah, getting to that finished project and seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, so let's move. You uh, this year, well, actually started a little bit before that, but you made your foray back into progressive rock with the Undoubting Thomas project. So, and that actually, started with a couple songs that you had prior to the album coming out. So, why don't you talk about what led you to start Undoubting Thomas, put those two songs out on YouTube, and then obviously go forward from that.
Um, the Undoubting Thomas stuff started. Um, I started writing songs that didn't fit anywhere. They just didn't fit. When I was at church, they wouldn't fit at church. They were too edgy, a little too heavy. Lyrical content was not, like a corporate worship kind of thing.
Yeah,
They're my own thoughts, and but they've been rattling around in my brain. And I'd wrote a bunch of songs. I still have a handful of songs that I wrote for as Undoubting Thomas that I haven't even released yet, that were much earlier on, that I wrote, while Shadowfields has been going on, because they just don't fit with
right.
Shadowfields. And you know because a lot of them are heavy electric guitars pulled back in keyboards again, drag
Yep.
out the old organ again. um but you know I, I put out a couple songs just because I had them. I think the first one was a song called The Serpent. It's an instrumental song.
Yeah,
um I wrote it right around 2000, right before I left the previous church, maybe 2000, 2002 or something. I wrote it, and I had a drummer play on it, but I never did anything with it, and it just kind of sat there. And finally, I don't know, it wasn't that long ago, what, 2018, 2019, I decided that I just want to put this out. And so I showed it to Heather, and Heather said, you ought to do something with that. So I had her come in, and she did some moaning and wailing, very Middle Easternish kind of wailing
yeah,
kind of sounds. She said it was very cathartic, to kind of like a scream therapy, I guess,
yeah.
right? Primal scream. Um, and I got another drummer in, and he played parts on it, re-recorded a bunch of stuff on it, and put it out. And I thought, I kind of like that. And then I had another song that had been laying around for just as long, and that was Not Every Voice.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just finished that up and put it out. And then I thought, well, that was it. It was kind of a back burner kind of thing. Maybe I'll put out something every once in a while. And, honestly, John, if it wasn't for you, that's probably where it would have stayed.
Well,
Um,
I'm glad it went further.
but you're getting me involved with Bill Bafford over at Rocks Records for the old Damascus stuff. That got me rethinking things, because that was a whirlwind with the Damascus things, like pulling all this stuff together to get
Yeah,
over to their mastering guy. and trying to pull all these old tracks and trying to find old tapes, what's playable, what's not playable, what's the best version of any of this old stuff. Um, Bringing that all back, and then being able to look back at what was going to be the fifth Damascus album, and then deciding that, hey, I'd like to just finish these up. And so I finished up some of them, and some of them came out really, I thought, really good. I like On a Wire. Um,
Mhm.
I thought On a Wire, I really like that, and it sounds good. So I'm like, wow, that's great. And then that album came out, and then I guess it did well enough that you were able to interest Bill in in seeing if I'd be interested in a solo thing. And I remember I believe it was September, October of last year, a little over a year ago, that we were on tour. I believe that was around the what is it, Helena um, hurricane through
Mhm.
North Carolina, because
Yeah.
we went through that hurricane on tour. It was a very
Right.
interesting tour. Um, but I got the call, or the emails from you about that at that time, and Heather's daughter was um, going to be spending some time with her daughter because she had some. She was living in Nashville and needed some help with babies and things like that, and so I had this window open. Maybe it wasn't, was it last year or the year before? I can't even remember anymore.
Yeah, it was last year because it came out in 2025, the album. So I
That's
think you
right.
started,
That's right.
yeah. So I think you said maybe around October of last year, maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
started writing.
And so I had a bunch of time open, and when Heather wasn't around, we weren't working on anything. And so I started taking some ideas, things that I wrote back in the early 2000s on keyboards. The opening refrain from The Mirror, you know,
Hmm.
ding-diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle-down.
Yeah.
um, that and the opening part of Another World. Uh, Both those I wrote over 20 years ago, but I never did anything with them because I had nothing to do with them, because they were just that part, just that little section. Um, so I just sat down and decided, all right, I'm just going to go for it, and just it was interesting, and it went by really fast. It flew by. I just had my home studio, had everything set up, and I'd just come home and I would just close the door and write. And around midnight, that was it for the night. And I'd do it again the next day and next day and next day. And by I think it only took a couple months to write the whole thing, and then it was just getting um, parts played properly.
Yeah.
Um, and I brought Pat Culligan, who had been on a Shadowfields tour with us uh, last year. He was on the Hurricane tour with us, and I remember talking with him, and I was asking him his drumming influences, and he said that he was really into Bill Bruford, and I was like, I wouldn't have picked him as a progger. And I said,
Yeah.
do you ever listen to prog music? He says, I used to play in a prog band in the '70s that toured. I'm like, oh, interesting. And so I started taking some of these odd ideas. I think The Mirror might have even been the very first song I sent to him. And I said, what can you do with this? And basically, what I sent him was the song with drums on it, but I programmed the drums,
Right.
and but they had the rhythms that I was looking for. And I said, what can you do with this? And they'd send me back something. I said, let's give this a shot. So he came over and we recorded drums, and it just worked out, and we just kind of hit it off, and um, it went so easily on that first song. And he's a nice guy, and I'm pretty picky. I'm pretty picky, and I'd apologize. I'd say, I'm sorry that I'm so picky about these things. And he would say, don't be sorry. I want you to tell me what you want because I want to give you what you want because otherwise this is a waste of time. And I'm like, perfect. He understood what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And and he played things. I could have played the drums on it, and I was planning on playing drums on it, but I just took another thing off my plate that I'd have to do. And it was enough to play, all the keyboards and guitars and all the vocal parts. And it was nice to have somebody I could bounce ideas off musically as far as the drum parts. And he could take it to another level that I wouldn't have been able to take it to.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we've been discussing your whole kind of like past 50 years of music. Let's
No
look at,
kidding.
let's talk about some songs across your catalog. So we can start back with
Okay.
Damascus, with the Lost Prayer from Will I Find You There?
That I was talking with Cliff the other day. He called me up and we were talking about that and he brought up the Lost Prayer and I was like, interesting you'd bring that up. Um, that song was kind of it was written from the perspective of remember in Romans 7, um, Paul talks about, that, oh, wretched man that I am, um, because he sees his own sin and he sees God's righteousness and he doesn't know how to put those two together. He doesn't know how
Yeah.
he's trying to explain how grace interplays with that. And that's what that song was about. That was kind of my I guess the huge epic for me at that time. I don't know, it was 6 minutes long, which seemed very long at the time. Um, but that I was it was my prayer. That's because I wrestle with a lot of things. I wrestle with depression. A lot of people do. I wrestle with, you know, understanding God's will and the way things are and why are
Yeah.
the things this way, God? Why aren't they all rosy and perfect? And um, I think faith is a wrestle. It's if it if faith and life is super easy, I sometimes wonder, are you really diving in deep, or are you just trying to stay surface level? Um, Maybe I'm just too moody. I don't know.
No, I
um,
mean, I think you make a good point. I mean, Jesus said, "In the world you'll have tribulation." So, I mean, the Christian walk is not, all roses and rainbows.
no,
There's
I've
going to
I've
be
never
struggles.
I've never found it to be that way.
Yeah,
Where some I know friends that are super bright and happy all the time. That is just, as much as I wish that was me. You can't change how you were designed,
right.
and uh, and so those were my deep thoughts on that. And it was a big wrestle with God on those lyrics, and um, it goes through a lot of different emotions and going through the coming to faith part of it near the end of the song.
Yeah,
Still, I still kind of wish I could go back and rewrite the ending, but or the it kind of gets into almost a reggae thing that I
yeah,
wished I
yeah.
hadn't wrote, but it was I wanted to get really light, and I don't think I hit the right mark on that one, but lyrically I liked it, and it was it was a powerful song for us at that time.
How about the Keeper from Timeless?
Uh, um, there was a I can't remember what verse it was in the Bible. I think it was in the Psalms somewhere about God being the keeper or something like that. And that was kind of like the thing that kind of uh, sparked my thought about that, um, about living, for God at this point.
Right.
And it's a fairly straightforward, simple song. Um, It was always a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. How about Reckless from Soon the Doors Will Open? That one's kind of a really like a rocking, energetic song.
I was when we were writing that when I wrote that one, I was kind of inspired. I think around the same time that that came out. Um, oh, what was it? There was a Kansas song off of Audio Visual. I think it was Audio Visions.
Oh, Audio Vision,
Um,
yeah.
uh,
Oh, there's this, I think
Restless or something like
oh,
that.
Relentless, Relentless.
Relentless.
That's the song. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the song,
Yeah.
and so I was listening to that, and it kind of sparked this thing in me, and I threw a banjo in it, and it was kind of I don't know. Uh, that was another one about coming to faith and having friends that hadn't come to faith and asking those tougher questions, and watching them turn away. So that's kind of what it's kind of like that reckless life. And I it wasn't to point fingers at somebody else. It was also pointing it back at me. Like
Right.
here had been my life for so many years that had been completely reckless, and um, it just showed me, you know, how things needed to change.
Awesome. How about a passing of moments from the Turning Tide, the fifth Damascus album? And that appears twice, of course, on the anthology.
Yeah, a passing of moments was an interesting song because I wrote that in a state of delirium. I had mono and I hadn't slept for I don't know 4 or 5 days straight. I just could not sleep. My throat was so swollen that I couldn't breathe. If I fell asleep, I'd stop breathing. So I didn't sleep for 5 days, and it was like in 2 in the morning, I had like a vision, um, that time is like this passing of these of soldiers, and each of these soldiers has a purpose, and it's like these moments in our life, and God has a reason for every one of those moments, even though we might not understand what those were. And you know some of them are sorrow, some of them are regret, and but some of them are the joy of being in God's presence. So it was kind of a little out there for some people. I don't think it was clear enough. The message in it probably wasn't very clear, um, but it meant something to me. And um, I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. It was based on a dream, or a
Yeah.
delirium that I had. But it was one of those songs that was there instantly. Because there's a handful of songs in my life that were just you just sit down and it's there, and
Yeah.
you can't scribble it out as fast as it's coming to you.
Yeah. And it had such a nice melody to it. It just beautiful melody.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And let's move on to your McKeown Humphrey Shadowfields catalog. So, how about Embrace the Possibilities from When the World Was Young? Very kind of
embrace the
upbeat message.
Embrace the possibilities. I had a really close friend. His name was Dr. Gary Collins. He
Hmm.
was a Christian psychologist. He
Yep.
wrote volumes, like volumes of books that are used in Christian psychology even still. And he was a very close friend of mine. He was the person who actually got me to become a worship leader at a church, a worship director. And he was speaking on one Sunday, and he wanted to talk about, that there's a possibility for everybody, that don't write people off. God has a plan for everybody. And I saw that in my own life, where I thought I honestly felt that God was done with me, and the things that I really loved the most, which was writing music, that there was a time that for me that was over. And through Gary's help, I saw that maybe there was something more, and that we need to embrace those possibilities that God has something more. And that was a that was a pretty meaningful song for me. And so I wrote it for that as a special music for the Sunday that he was preaching. And when we were putting out the first Humphrey McKeown album, I played it for Heather, and she's like, "That's a really good song. You ought to put that on here." Because it fit well with another song that's on the album, which is called Grace Around My Heart.
Hmm.
Um, a very similar acoustic guitar driven song. And so, the funny thing is, Heather and I never set out to be like Christian artists kind of thing. We were
Right.
never interested in being in the Christian world, but it doesn't take a whole lot of reading to figure out where we're at,
Yeah.
because it's just who we are. We write about what we know and what we think.
Yeah, definitely. How about On My Way Home from the On My Way Home album? That one, when I first heard it, it reminded me of Neil Young's Old Man. It kind of had like a little vibe, like that kind of melody similarity.
Oh, you figured that one out, have you? Yes, it does use a similar chord structure.
Yeah,
Yes, it does. But I played it on banjo.
yeah,
Um, Heather, I asked Heather about that song, and she was feeling that On My Way Home was, let me tell you what her words were. It's wandering the world, looking for everything else but home. While we may not understand that home is where we feel together, getting off a bus stop and feeling the warmth of people who love us. That's what it was about. This song is a celebration, the great awakening of the one who has realized this and understands. Um, she also felt that, in some ways it was the completion to the story that I started in 30 Years On. There's a song on the second album also called 30 Years On.
yeah.
And it's a miserably sad song that I wrote, that was based on, I was going to look this up today and now I forgot. Um, what is the book in the Bible that it uses the analogy of a man who marries a prostitute who keeps leaving him?
Oh, yeah.
It starts with an H.
Yeah. Is it Haggai
It might be Haggai.
or Hosea? I know it's one of the H's.
Yeah,
Yeah, or
exactly.
Habakkuk. Maybe Habakkuk.
N-
Yeah, maybe it's Hosea.
Yeah, it could be
Yeah,
Hosea.
I think it's Hosea. Maybe.
You can edit this part.
Yeah.
um, and so that was kind of my thinking, even though on my song on 30 Years On, it was about a love leaving, but it was it was that storyline from the Bible that inspired that the writing of that. And so Heather was feeling that on my way home was this woman returning home, to the love that she left. And so it was kind of a pulling it all together sort of thing.
Cool. How about the You I Knew on All I Wanted to Hear?
And that was an interesting song. That was also biblically written. Um, I can't remember the references anymore, but I played a tune for you and you wouldn't dance.
Oh
There's a
yeah,
part of
yeah,
the
yeah.
Bible about
Yep,
that.
yep.
And um, we were writing it about people that either seem to have changed or they never were what they said they were or what you thought they were. Because at some point you wake up, you go, what happened to you? What happened to the person I thought I knew? You're not you're not there anymore. The person that I knew doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
And we've all had people in our lives kind of like that. And that was what the song was about. We pulled in the biblical references, about uh, they've got words that you won't even understand, that
Right.
like you could speak, but you aren't going to understand any of these things. This just has Jesus spoken parables that,
Right.
people that were given the understanding would understand it, but otherwise people would not get what he was saying.
Right. Right.
Um, so it was a sad song about the loss of friends that we thought were one thing, and now we're not even saying like we thought they were Christians and they weren't. Not thinking that at all, but they just changed in such a way that like they broke off all connection with us, and we're like, what happened to that friend that I knew?
Yeah. Good. How about Better Day from Tapestry of Shadows?
That was kind of our bluesy-ish song, very kind of Chicago blues kind of thing. It if you listen to it, it's not very bluesy at all compared to like real blues. Um, but for us, it's kind of a sludgy bluesy kind of thing. And we were thinking about again, in some ways, it was similar to Embrace the Possibilities, where it's encouraging people to look beyond what they see, that there's something more to this. Like here's this guy that's down and out. Well, don't count him out. That he's got a dream and he's got a hope,
Right.
and we need to affirm him in that dream and that hope and help him get there. Um, a poor girl from the South Side, and that all she's got is dreams. And we, Heather and I, we want to be people that lift others up and help them to become all that they can be. And there's a lot of other people that would like to push people down to make them feel more important.
Right.
And so that was kind of what that song was about, that we've got a hope. They've got a hope, they've got a dream, you know about a better day.
Got a Better Day. How about The Deed Is Done from Festival for One?
That one's I was surprised you picked that one because I love that song. That's
I do too.
probably my it's probably my favorite song from Festival for One. um Other than I love Alice, but that's because it has all these cool harmonies from Heather. But
Yeah.
um The Deed Is Done is a personification of time, that as soon as a person is born, the hands of time, she, has set the rules. So it's a call to attention, the feel of every needle on a pine tree, the very sense of the wind, and not taking anything for granted. The time is jealous. She stays close, pouring time willingly from an hourglass, and will not pick favorites. Everyone gets the same treatment. It's looking at time. Time is slipping away, and it's kind of live in the moment and find the joy that's here right this second, because you're not promised anything more than this.
Right. It kind of reminds me of this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. You're focused on right now. Yeah.
It's a hard thing for me to hear sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know about for you. I tend to live in the future. Like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I want to get there. I'm trying to do this, and sometimes I forget to celebrate the small wins of right now.
Right. Right. And how about Scenes Through a Window from the most current Wonderful World Shadowfields album? That one I thought had like a progressive type sound it with a little bit of Beatles influences in there too. Is what was hearing.
Uh, it very well could be. That one I wrote, and for me, that is the completion of 30 years on. Um, and that's studying the life of a woman who's left home and has been on her own. Life is just lonely rooms and lonely towns, being alone. Nobody calls her. There's she has no friends. Um, but there's still this person calling her back. And I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but to me it is it's God's call back to us, you know, that um at the end of the song that it asks the question, would things change if you received a letter that says come home? And we did a video for it, and at the end, the letter comes in the mail that says come home. And I think that, on a spiritual level, that's what God is saying to all of us. He's We aren't, we're all prodigals, and we're not meant to be sleeping with the pigs. We're meant to be coming home. And he doesn't force anybody to do that, but he's putting it out there, and he's calling, and he's waiting at the door.
Yeah.
And that's a very special song for me. That and it absolutely was way more proggy than the majority
Yeah.
of stuff. It could have been an Undoubting Thomas song, but and Heather even told me the other night. She said, you should have held off on that one and thrown it on your solo album." But I don't know. I really liked it. It meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we mentioned a little bit about it, but when you did that, the other Undoubting Thomas song, "Not Every Voice," which is not on the debut album. How about talk about that a little bit?
Not every voice was. Hopefully, the listeners won't think that I need psychological help, but I probably do anyway. Um, but we all hear voices in our head, and some of those voices are God, some of those voices are our own, and some of those voices are not. And not everything that you hear in your head is actually true.
Right.
And I think that if you go back to the garden, I think I think the worst thing that happened in the garden was the serpent putting into Eve's mind, is God really good?
Right.
Is God good? And it's that it sows that seed of doubt. And so I think, through all of our life, we wrestle with that thing: is God good, or is God against us? And I certainly wrestled with that. I've had ups, and I've had a lot of heavy downs that were um, debilitating.
Yeah.
In those down moments, I question, is God good? Does God have a plan? If he has a plan, why are things so horrible? And and so that was kind of a song written to myself, to remind myself that not everything I'm hearing in my head is true. You know,
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me. Well, I mean, when you read the Psalms, David struggled with those exact same thoughts and stuff like that. And then I think that anchoring passage where he says, "Though I walk through the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for Thou art with me." So, I mean, it's a human thing. What you're talking about in our relationship with God. You see it all through the Psalms that there's and the laments that are there. Why was he going through these things? So I think that it's a
I,
valid
I
valid thing to talk about.
I think those are a lot of the passages that most people skip over, but those are the
Yeah.
passages that actually mean something to me. Um, I've always been drawn to, like, Psalm 51.
Mhm.
Um, Life is hard. It's a lot messier than we anticipate it going to be,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
doesn't turn out the way we think it's going to be. But we have to, at some point, and at least at times, we have to realize that God has this. It's not in my control. Um, this will be whatever God has for me.
Yeah. And I think that's it. When I'm going through difficulties like that, I and get emotional. You start, the flesh comes out. You know, you start acting like in a way that would not be quote unquote Christian behavior. But I always have to come back and be anchored by probably my life verse for me is Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are calling to your purpose. So even if I'm going through this extremely difficult situation in life, I have to, and oftentimes once I've gone through it, I look back and I say, oh, all right, now I understand why God allowed this. Some other blessing um, comes
Yeah.
out of it, um, so again,
See, you got the Romans 8 thing, and I keep getting stuck at Romans 7. That's
yeah. Yeah, we see
you know
they're both valid, right? Both
ex
chapters are there. We got to go through
e-
seven to get to eight.
exactly. I always stumble and get right up to 8:1, and like,
Yeah,
it's tough to get in there. But when you get through it, then you can see it from the other side. But
yeah,
it's life is difficult.
yeah, and some of it, maybe we won't see it until eternity. We may not know the reasons why. So we got to think about that too. All right, how about Another World from the debut of In the Process of Untiring Thomas album?
Um, yeah, that and Dark Waters were the heaviest ones for me.
Yeah,
Um, there's so many lyrics in Another World. It goes through so much. It's again, it's wishing and longing for something more, and um, and yes, God promises us something better to come, but um, it's kind of reminding God, promise me again that this other world is coming, that life is not always going to be the way it is.
yeah,
Um, and you look at you know, the hopelessness of humanity in general. Um, it's hard to listen to the radio, like listen to news or anything like that. It's all horrible things, and there's so little bright spots in life. Currently,
yeah,
um, and it weighs me down. And that's the perspective that I wrote it from. Um, there's a quiet section in there that just talks about he's just a boy, just one of the unwashed masses, that this hopelessness and this futility, and there's just everything is surrounded by hate. But eventually, God is going to make it all right again. Um,
yeah,
but Christ will return, and it couldn't happen soon enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's kind of like your epic too in on that album too, musically,
Yeah,
the long
yeah.
one.
I think that was the first time I wrote a 13 plus minute song. So
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So is there, I meant these are some of the songs that I talked about, but is there any other particular songs or songs in your catalog of music that you consider your favorite or your greatest musical achievement? I know, kind of hard to, you have to go through the 50 years of music, but is there things that stand out? Maybe other songs I didn't mention.
um, just thinking recently, I love so much stuff that was on the Shadowfields Wonderful World album. Um, that I played more piano on that album than I had in a long time, which usually I try not to play piano on the albums. Heather usually plays piano on them. But I enjoyed that, and um, I I I liked so much that was on that album.
Yeah,
Uh, Wonderful World and uh, Scenes Through a Window. Those are the bookends of the album, and to me, like those were like the highlights of the album for me.
yeah,
Um, for the style of what we did with my leading on piano, those were it. And Heather wrote some amazing lyrics on Wonderful World that um, I really liked a lot because it kind of fit along the lines of there's a song by Chicago called Dialogue.
I
It
know it.
was back and forth conversation, and that was
Yeah,
kind of like what we were doing in Wonderful World, a back and forth. where Heather's, the pie in the sky. It's a wonderful world, and I'm like, is it really a wonderful world? You know, I think
Yeah.
that kind of sums up our personalities anyway. So she's much more the optimist, and I'm much more the pessimist.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there gonna be any, additional Shadowfields albums in the future?
yeah, we've already written half an album at this point. We've been holding off releasing some of it. We wrote a couple really beautiful things that I can't wait to share with people.
Cool.
Um, that's a little bit slow going right now. It's been rough for me, job wise for a little bit, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of recovering from that and going into surgery soon for my knee. And
Yeah.
so I've been a little out of commission. Um, I'm hoping absolutely for another Shadowfields album or three. We want to continue. We love doing what we're doing. I'd like to do more with Undoubting Thomas.
Yeah.
I've definitely talked with Pat, the drummer, about it, and I've talked to Heather about it because Heather did sing a fair amount of background vocals and harmonies and things like that on the Undoubting Thomas album. And what people might not know on the album, uh, she kind of signed off on pretty much every lyric because I told her when I started writing this that I said I do not want this to be embarrassing or dopey or cringy at all. You know, I, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of music that gets put out as Christian music, and I listen to the words and they're like super trite and using Christianese,
Yep.
and it's like it's almost embarrassing. Like, would I play this for my atheist friend? No, I wouldn't, because it's coming from a whole different slant,
Yeah.
kind of churchified, kind of in a way. And I didn't want to be that way at all on the album. So as I wrote lyrics late at night, I wrote all the music first, and then I wrote the words after that. And I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't have the exact words. I'd write words and I would text them to Heather in the middle of the night when she was in Nashville. And next day she'd send something back and say, "Oh, that's really good." And so um, she did help out a whole lot with that. And so I'd like to continue on with the Undoubting Thomas.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of a dream that I don't know if it'll come true, but I'd love to have a chance to play the album and the rest of the songs that I've written for Undoubting Thomas. I'd like to get a chance to play those live at least once.
Yeah.
Um, because I don't have a band to do that stuff. I have Pat to play the drums, Heather to do some vocals with me, but I played all the keyboards and all the guitars. And in most cases, there's at least two players worth of keyboards and two players worth of guitars and a bass player.
Right. Right.
So that's a lot of extra people. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But I really I'm very happy with the way the album came out. Um, it's it still means a real lot to me. It's hard to look back on some stuff that I've written and that I ever want to hear again, because usually once I finish with it, I'm done with it. I don't want to hear it again. Um, but I actually listened to the album a couple days ago again, which never happens, but it still means something to me. And for me, you were asking about like songs that really meant something. It probably Dark Waters would be the song for me, and just that it's probably the heaviest and the darkest of all the songs.
Yeah.
Um, because it's about being stuck in a dark place and not seeing a way out. And I'm not perfect, and I feel that way an awful lot. Um, and on a musical level, um, out of the 9/8 section, in the middle of the instrumental section, and there's a guitar solo, and then the guitar solo ramps up and it comes back into the vocals at the end. an
Right.
octave up from where it was. To me, that's the pinnacle of the entire album. I know most people would say the pinnacle is the end of um, Another World, but not
Right.
for me.
Cool. All right, how about discuss the new Christmas song that you recorded for the
Oh,
Christmas That Rocks new sampler that's coming out this year, and you already have your copy, so right, so it's available. I think they're selling it now, so
yeah,
it's shipping now. So
that, that's great because Bill's put out both the Damascus um, Good Christian Men Rejoice that I did last year,
right,
and he put out God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen that I did this year. Because when I thought about it, last year with Good Christian Men Rejoice, basically it was me, and then I had the guys from Damascus sing on it, but all the instruments, I just played all the instruments. Um, but when I came around to this year, I was thinking about other Christmas carols that I could do, and I was like, I really want to do something really interesting. I think I wrote the intro to God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. Like I think it's in 15 or something like that. It felt really right to me.
yeah, yeah,
And Pat had a lot of fun wrestling with the time signatures and stuff like that. But it's kind of heavy, and I like it a lot. Um, we'll see if people add it to their playlists, right? Um,
yep. Um, So, what would you say to someone who wants to pursue authentic music today? Because obviously, the world of music today is a changing landscape, and unfortunately, we're seeing also this emergence of AI music, which drives me crazy when I see it on the internet. It's like, I hear stories. Oh well, I wrote some lyrics. I don't know how to write music, so I let AI write it. And my thought immediately is, then find someone who writes music, not let AI do it. But who would you say? What would you say to someone who's trying to pursue music today and be authentic with it in the kind of the landscape that we're in now, musically?
I I definitely tell people to go after it and do it badly, not on purpose,
Right.
but anything you start to do, um, you're not going to do it very well at first. Um, I would definitely say, I started writing songs when I was 10 years old, and my songs have definitely gotten better since I was 10 years old. Thank you, God. uh, but you got to be willing to start where you're at. And I don't want AI to do the heavy lifting for me. I want to learn to be better at it. Make it a personal challenge. It's you become something. Sure, maybe a computer could do it better than you, but that's a computer. That's not you anymore.
Yeah, it
So,
removes the human factor, that human
well,
element that needs to be there for music.
exactly. And it bothers me that there's an awful lot of people that are just fine with AI writing songs and that becoming, a big hit. And but a lot of times I've read the lyrics on some of these AI generated songs, and they're embarrassing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't find them to be deep or intriguing at all. Um,
yeah,
you know, I also think that there's a lot of people that want to be celebrities or influencers. They don't want to be a musician or an artist. And you got to decide, what do you want to do? If
right.
you want to be a celebrity or an influencer, then you're going to go with the quickest route possible, which AI can help you get there. But if you're a true artist, it's going to be the rest of your life, and you can't judge it by sales because, listen, there are no sales anymore. Um, right now, I could spend the money and buy 3,000 copies of the Undoubting Thomas album, and I can hit the charts. Because that's all it takes is if you can sell 3,000 copies in a month, you're going to hit the charts
Yeah,
because nobody buys anymore.
yeah. It's
Um,
so much
and
streaming now.
yeah, and the streaming services just do not want to pay. They will not
Yeah,
pay.
yeah,
Um,
which is
it's become,
unfortunate.
yeah. So you got to be doing it for you and to be all that God has made you to be. Um,
Yeah.
not waiting for the big payoff. That's probably not going to happen. Um, but the payoff for me is finishing the song and be able to hear the final product and go, yeah, we said what we wanted to say, and this was us at this point in time, and then go write another one.
Yeah, awesome. So, any final comments you'd like to add to close it out?
Other than just a gigantic thank you to you, John.
You're welcome. It's been my privilege to be a part of it, to help get your music out there. Since, like, as I've mentioned, and people have heard this probably in other interviews uh, that I've been in, like the Area 312 Rock and Metal
Mm-hmm.
Vodcast, those ones that I've been a huge fan since the Damascus days. Always having those cassettes, always saying, I mean, and they've had that dream. Oh, I wish these would come on CD, and it happened. So I'm very happy to
Yeah,
be here. And then to see the Undoubting Thomas come to fruition, and I'm really hoping for more of that in the future as well.
I am too. That's definitely on my heart that I want to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna close out the interview, and then you just hold on for a minute afterwards. Uh,
Sure.
so I'd like to encourage all of you to follow the light that shines out in the darkness, and God bless everyone. Have a great day.